You know what I'm thinking? I was this fucking close to downloading Subway Surfers before we turned onto this stupid fucking road.
What if you got into a car with your closest friends, knowing that this might be the last time all of you are together? You don't know it yet, but everyone is going their separate ways. Someone is moving, someone is starting a new job, someone is trying to figure out what they're even doing with their life. So you decide to do something simple. Get some food, drive around, talk, laugh, maybe argue about something completely stupid. Just one more night before everything changes. And then you take a wrong turn. At least that's what you think happened, because when you turn around, the road is gone. There's no intersection, no way back. Just an endless stretch of asphalt surrounded by trees. And when you stop the car, people come running out of the woods. They're screaming. They're begging you to let them inside. And they're willing to do almost anything to get in your car. So you drive, and you keep driving. And eventually you realize something is very, very wrong. The gas isn't going down, you're not getting hungry, you're not getting tired, and no matter how far you go, the road doesn't end. Now, on paper, it didn't sound like a pretty straightforward horror concept. 4 friends get trapped on an endless road. Something is hiding in the woods, they need to find a way out. Simple. But Alexander Ulm's movie is doing something much more interesting than simply asking, what if you were trapped on an endless road? Is asking what if life itself felt like an endless road, because these 4 characters aren't just trapped in a strange supernatural world. They're trapped at one of the most terrifying points in any person's life. They're leaving college, they're leaving their youth, they're watching their friends become different people, and they're being told that they're supposed to know what they're going next, except none of them really do. And that's what makes it end so disturbing, because eventually the road stops feeling like a supernatural nightmare and starts feeling like something we already understand. So today, we're going to take a deep dive into It Ends. We're going to talk about the road, the people in the woods, the 4 completely different ways these characters deal with being trapped, why James becomes obsessed with finding an ending, and why the final few minutes completely change the meaning of the movie. Because by the time we reach the end, you might realize that the road was never really the monster, the road was the point. Before It Ends becomes a horror movie, it's a movie about friendship. James, Day, Fisher, and Tyler are 4 recent graduates who are getting together for what is supposed to be one final hangout before their lives start moving in different directions. And that detail is incredibly important, because these aren't 4 random people who happen to get trapped together. They're friends who are already standing at a crossroads. Tyler hasn't seen the others in about a year. There's already distance between them. They are not the same people they were before, and they know that things are about to change. That's why the opening spends so much time on seemingly meaningless conversations. They talk about stupid hypothetical situations. They argue about which animals will win in ridiculous fights. They joke with each other. They annoy each other. They interrupt each other. They do the exact kind of thing that friends do when they've known each other long enough that silence doesn't have to be filled with anything important. And this is one of the smartest things Ulam does, because if the movie started with supernatural horror immediately, the road would just be a cool concept. By giving us this ordinary night first, the road becomes a disruption of normal life. These people were supposed to leave the car eventually. They were supposed to go home. They were supposed to wake up the next day, start jobs, move, make new friends, fall in love, break up, make mistakes, grow older. Instead, they get trapped, and suddenly the future doesn't exist anymore. There is only the road. That makes the premise even more frightening. It's sad, because the movie takes 4 people who are standing at the beginning of adulthood and puts them somewhere where they can never actually become adults. They can't move forward with their lives, but they also can't go back. And that becomes the central contradiction of the entire movie. They're constantly moving while going absolutely nowhere. Eventually, Tyler realizes that they may have missed the turn they're looking for. The others aren't convinced though. They tell him that they haven't passed anything. Tyler turns the car around anyway, and that's what changes everything. The road behind them is blocked by a wall of trees, not a normal dead end, not something that could have reasonably have been there, a completely impossible barrier. And when Tyler gets out to investigate, people start running out of the woods, dozens of them. They're screaming for help. They're trying to get into the Jeep. They're grabbing at the windows, they're clawing at Fisher, and the 4 friends barely escape. They drive away, then try to calm down. They try to understand what just happened. Then they stop again, and the same thing happens. The people come out of the woods again, and again. Eventually, they discover something even worse. The road doesn't end. They drive for hours, then a full day, then longer, and the road just keeps going. And now, Here's what I love about this setup. The movie doesn't give us a monster. It gives us a system. There are rules. If they stop for too long, the people come. If they keep driving, they're safe. The gas doesn't disappear. They don't get tired. They don't get hungry. They can keep on going. And because Ulam doesn't fully explain why any of this is happening, the audience is trapped in the same uncertainty as the characters. We don't know what the road is, who the people are, know if they're dead or not, know if they're trapped. We don't know whether this is hell or purgatory, a curse, another dimension, or something that doesn't even have a name. And that's important because the movie isn't really interested in giving us an answer. It's interested in watching these people react to not having one. And that's where the horror really begins. Think about what happens when something goes wrong in your own life. Usually the first thing you want is an explanation. Why did this happen? What caused it? How do I fix it? What happens next? Because if you understand the problem, you can start solving it. James is exactly this kind of person. He wants information, he wants rules, he wants logic. So the group starts experimenting. They time what happens when they stop. Eventually they figure out that they have roughly 90 seconds before the people from the woods begin attacking. They inspect the car, they look through the supplies, they try to understand the environment. They even attempt to communicate with one of the people from the woods, but all they get back is "help me." That's it. No explanation, no clue, no secret that unlocks the mystery. Just another person who appears to be trapped. This is where it ends quietly introduces one of its biggest ideas. The characters are looking for an explanation because they believe an explanation will give them control. But what if there is no explanation? What if something can happen to you without having a satisfying reason? That's terrifying because it's true. We like to believe that everything happens for a reason. We tell ourselves that bad experiences teach us something, that failure leads somewhere, that pain has a purpose, that if we keep moving forward, eventually everything will make sense. But the road doesn't promise that. It simply exists. And James cannot accept that. This is where the movie becomes a character study, because the four friends don't respond to the road the same way. That is not an accident. Each person represents a different way of dealing with uncertainty. Tyler wants to act, James wants to understand, Dave wants to feel, and Fisher wants to laugh. At first, they are just personality traits, but the longer they stay on the road, the more those traits become survival mechanisms, and eventually, they pull the group apart. Tyler is the first person to truly give up. After driving more than 56,000 miles, Tyler decides he can't do it anymore. He doesn't believe continuing will solve anything, so he leaves. He walks into the woods, and he tells James to keep driving. If James finds an end, he should let him know. It's an incredibly strange move because Tyler isn't killed, he isn't dragged away. He doesn't have some dramatic final confrontation. He simply stops. And that might be more disturbing, because Tyler is essentially saying, I don't care where this goes anymore. He's refusing to continue participating in a system that he no longer believes has meaning, and that fits Tyler's character. Earlier in the movie, we learned that Tyler has already struggled with the expectations of ordinary life. He isn't particularly interested in forcing himself into the future everyone expects of him. So when the road becomes literally endless, he doesn't see a reason to keep pretending that moving forward is automatically better than stopping. Tyler's choice isn't presented as something heroic, but it isn't presented as something stupid either. That's what makes it interesting. He's simply choosing one way to respond to an impossible situation, and that choice will become increasingly important as the other characters begin making their own decisions. After Tyler leaves, the group eventually adapts, and this is where it ends changes. The first part of the movie is about survival. The second part is about existence, because eventually the characters realize they're going to be here for a while. So they create routines, they make rules, they play music, they steal things from abandoned cars, they argue about stupid things, they create little moments of normal life inside something completely abnormal, and most importantly, Dave and Fisher start having screaming sessions. They literally just scream because they need somewhere to put all that frustration. This becomes their ritual, almost like taking a smoke break, except instead of smoking, they scream into the woods. It's funny, it's sad, and it's incredibly human, because they're no longer trying to solve the road, they're trying to survive being on it. And that difference is everything. Day and Fisher eventually understand something James doesn't. If there is no way to escape, you still have to decide how you're going to spend your time. That's a very uncomfortable idea, because imagine knowing that you're going to be stuck somewhere forever. At some point you have two options. You can spend every second trying to escape, or you can start building a life inside the place you're trapped in. Day and Fisher choose the second option. James refuses. James is the most interesting character in the movie because he's not wrong. That's important. James isn't stupid. He's not cowardly. He's not weak. He's actually probably the most determined person in the group. The problem is, he just can't let go. He needs there to be an answer. He needs the road to mean something. Because if the road has no explanation, then everything he's been doing has been pointless. And that's unacceptable to him. So James keeps driving. At first, this looks admirable. He refuses to give up. He's the one person who believes there is a way out. But slowly, that hope becomes an obsession. And the movie starts asking a really uncomfortable question. When does perseverance become self-destruction? Because hope can keep you alive, but hope can also keep you trapped. James believes that if he keeps driving, eventually he'll find something. A clue, an exit, a pattern, an answer, anything. That's exactly how people can approach life. You tell yourself, just keep going. Things will get better. Eventually I'll figure it out. I'll be successful. I'll be happy. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But what happens when you're so focused on reaching the destination that you stop experiencing the journey? That's James. Eventually the group starts finding abandoned cars, and these cars are one of the movie's most unsettling images because they're proof that they're not the first people to drive this road. Someone else was here, someone else got trapped, someone else kept driving, and eventually they stopped. One abandoned car has an odometer that has gone beyond 1,000,000 miles. Think about what that means. Someone drove that far, a distance so absurd that it stops feeling like distance at all, and yet there's still no end. That's the moment when the road stops feeling like an adventure, because now the characters have evidence that this has happened before, and possibly that it will happen to them too. Eventually, after more than 800,000 miles, something changes. The people in the woods stop attacking. The group sees them lying near the road. James becomes excited, because finally, something is different. Maybe this is the exit. Maybe the rules have changed. Maybe they've reached the end. But Day and Fisher don't react the same way, and James gets frustrated. Because to him, this is proof that continuing has been worth it. To them, it's just another change in a place that doesn't make sense. And this is the difference between them. James sees uncertainty as a puzzle. Day and Fisher sees uncertainty as reality. Eventually, Day and Fisher make a decision. They stop the car, they turn off the engine, and they take the keys. James panics. They tell him something he absolutely does not want to hear. There is no escape. They've accepted it, and they believe James is torturing himself by continuing to hope. This is one of the most important scenes in the entire movie, because for the first time, James is forced to confront the possibility that they're right. He tries to restart the car, nothing. He tries again, nothing. And suddenly the person who spent the entire movie believing in logic becomes completely desperate. He prays, he begs, he promises he'll do anything. And then the engine starts. James looks at Day, looks at Fisher, and drives away. They don't chase him, they simply embrace, and James is alone. This is where his obsession has finally achieved his goal. He's free to search for the answer, but he has lost the people he was searching with. And that's the tragedy, because the thing James thought was going to save him is the thing that isolates him. This is where I think the movie reveals what it's actually about, because look at where these characters were when the movie first started. They had just graduated, they were at the beginning of adulthood, they were about to separate, they were supposed to start figuring out their lives, and then they get trapped on an endless road. That's not subtle, but the movie's smart enough not to beat us over the head with it. Instead, it lets the metaphor play out naturally. The road is adulthood. You get in, you start moving, and everyone keeps asking, where are you going? You're expected to have an answer. What career? What relationship? Where will you live? How much money will you make? What do you want to accomplish? And the assumption is that if you just keep moving, you'll eventually reach somewhere. But what if there isn't a final destination? What if adulthood is just a series of roads? You graduate, you work, you change jobs, you move, you meet someone, you lose someone, you start over, you set a goal, you set another goal, then another, and suddenly you look up and realize you've been driving for years. That's what makes it ends hit differently. The supernatural premise is impossible, but the feeling isn't. The feeling of moving without knowing where you're going is incredibly real. And that's why the movie has connected with people. Critics have repeatedly identified the transition into adulthood and the uncertainty surrounding it as one of the film's central ideas. This is also why the people in the woods are so interesting. We never get a satisfying explanation from them, and honestly, I don't think we're supposed to, because they represent another response to being trapped. At the beginning, they are desperate. They see a car and immediately rush towards it. They scream, they beg, they want out. They haven't accepted their situation, but later they become quiet. They stop chasing the car, they lie near the road, and they seem completely defeated. And eventually, James encounters people who appear to have simply stopped. That's the progression. Panic, resistance, acceptance, and then nothing. And James goes through the same progression, except he takes much longer to reach it. And that's why the road doesn't need a monster. The horror is watching people slowly lose their certainty, watching them realize they can't control the situation, watching them decide what kind of person they're going to be when the control disappears. That's the real horror. Eventually, James reaches more than 1,000,000 miles, and then something happens that never happened before. Rain. It's such a simple thing, but James is terrified, because there hasn't been rain, not once. The rules have changed, and because James has spent so long trying to understand the rules, a change in the rules becomes terrifying. He starts wondering if it's punishment, if God is doing this, if something has changed because of him. And this is another important detail. James doesn't just want an escape. He wants a reason. He needs the universe to make sense, but the universe isn't giving him one. So he keeps driving and driving and driving until eventually he sees something ahead. Cars, dozens of them, abandoned vehicles filling the road, and beyond them, the road finally disappears. James gets out, he walks past the cars, and eventually he sees it again. A sign with two simple words: road ends. This should be the happiest moment in the entire movie, right? James was right. There is an end. The road really does end. He finally solved it. He finally found the answer. Except there's nothing there. No portal, no doorway, no magical escape, no explanation. Just asphalt ending in a field, cars surrounding the area, and silence. James sits there and he stays there for hours, eventually more than a day. This is where the movie completely destroys his worldview, because James spent the entire movie believing that the end would justify the journey, but when he finally reaches the end means nothing. It's just a sign. That's it. Road ends. And I think that's the most important joke in the entire movie. The title promised us it ends, and it technically does, but that doesn't mean anything. The road ending doesn't solve James. It doesn't bring him what he wanted. It doesn't bring his friends back, explain why the road existed. It doesn't tell him what's next. It just ends, and James finally understands. And then we get to one of the most smallest but most important moments in the movie, the Cliff Bar. Earlier, the group found one inside the car. They joke about eating it, but James doesn't want them to, because if they trap forever, what happens when you digest it? It's a ridiculous thought, but it becomes symbolic, because the Cliff Bar represents one of the last pieces of their old life, a tiny piece of normality, something they saved, something they were afraid to use. James finally eats it, and he starts crying. Not because it's magical, not because it saves him, but because it tastes good. That's all. After everything he's been through, he's finally able to experience something without trying to turn it into a solution. He's not analyzing it, not asking it what it means. He's just tasting something. And that might be the first time James has truly lived in the moment. Then he screams, just like Day and Fisher did. The person who spent the entire movie refusing to participate in their little ritual finally does it. He lets everything out: the anger, the fear, the grief, the exhaustion, the loneliness. Then something changes. James turns the car around. This is the part of the ending I think is overlooked. James doesn't find the end and decide to stay there. He turns around and he goes back. Why? Because he finally realizes what he actually wanted. He thought he wanted the road to end, but what he really wanted was his friends. And that's why the final stretch is so important. James begins driving back in the direction he came from, and eventually he finds another person, someone lying near the road, someone who appears completely defeated. James could keep going, but instead, he pulls the man into the car and starts talking to him. He asks him one of the same ridiculous hypothetical questions he used to debate with Fisher at the beginning, and suddenly, the movie has become full circle. At the beginning, James was sitting in the car with his friends arguing about pointless hypothetical situations. At the end, he's sitting in the same kind of car on the same road asking the same kind of question. And now, there's a stranger beside him. And James isn't alone anymore. That is the ending. Not escape, not victory. Connection. Alexander Ulam himself has described James as someone who struggles with control and rationality, while the other characters find meaning in different ways. Ulam specifically said James eventually realizes that he actually enjoys talking with his friends, rather than deriving meaning solely from the external structure he has attached himself to. And suddenly, the entire movie makes sense. So, what is the road? I don't think there's one literal answer. That's important. You can interpret it as purgatory, hell, a supernatural loop, or some type of cosmic punishment. But I think the movie is deliberately more interested in what the road feels like than what it literally is. The road is uncertainty, adulthood, existence. It's the feeling that you're supposed to know where you're going, while secretly having absolutely no idea. And the four characters represent four different ways of responding to that. Tyler says stop. Danny and Fisher say accept it. James says keep going. And eventually, James says turn around. That's the evolution. And none of these responses are presented as completely right or wrong. That's what makes the movie mature. Because real life doesn't have a correct strategy. Some people need goals, need acceptance, need to stop and rethink everything. Find meaning in relationships, find it in work, find it in art, in religion. Some people can never find an answer at all. And it ends doesn't tell us which one's correct. It simply asks, what are you going to do when you realize there may not be an answer? There's another reason I love the title. It ends. Not the endless road, not forever, not road to nowhere. It ends. The title itself is a promise. It tells you that eventually there will be an ending. And that's exactly what James believes. He believes that if he keeps driving long enough, the movie has to give him something. A destination, an explanation, a conclusion, and technically, the movie does. The road ends, but James discovers something much more disturbing. An ending isn't the same thing as an answer. That's true to life. We spend so much time believing that reaching the next stage will finally make everything else make sense. But when we get there, there's another question, another problem, goal, another road. And eventually, you realize that maybe life isn't a story where everything is building towards one explanation. Maybe you're just living it. And that's why the ending isn't James finding the road's exit, it's James turning around. Because once he stops demanding an answer from the road, he can finally start experiencing it. This is what I think separates It Ends from a lot of modern horror. It doesn't need to scare you every 5 minutes, or need constant kills, or a monster jumping out of the darkness. It creates a question and then forces you to sit with it. What if this never ends? What if nobody can save you? You can't go back. There's no explanation. What if all you can do is keep going? That's existential horror. And it's one of the reasons the movie feels so different from a traditional creature feature or slasher. The road itself is the monster, but even that's not quite right, because the road isn't attacking them, it's just there. It doesn't care, it doesn't hate them, it doesn't want anything from them, it simply continues. And that's arguably more frightening, because the most terrifying things in life aren't always things that want to hurt you. Sometimes they're things that simply don't care. So let's go back to the beginning. 4 friends, one last night together, a simple drive, a wrong turn, and suddenly they're trapped. At first they think the goal is to escape, then they think the goal is to understand, then the goal is to survive. Then they realize the goal might simply be to exist. And that's the journey James goes through. He starts the movie believing that his life needs direction. He believes that if he could just find the right road, he will eventually find the right destination. But the road doesn't give him that. It takes everything away. His friends leave, his certainty disappears, his logic fails, and hope becomes obsession. And eventually, he reaches the end. And the end gives him nothing. So he turns around. For the first time, he stops searching for an answer. He searches for someone. And that's why I don't think the ending is depressing. I think it's actually hopeful. Because James doesn't escape, but he changes. At the beginning, he needs the road to have meaning. At the end, he creates meaning himself. By talking, by connecting, helping someone else, refusing to be alone. And maybe that's the real answer the movie has been hiding from us the entire time. Maybe the point isn't reaching the end. Maybe the point is finding someone to talk to while you're on your way there. And that's what makes it end so much more terrifying than it initially appears. Because when you first watch this movie, you think you're watching a movie about 4 people trapped on an impossible road. But by the end, you realize you're watching a story about 4 people trying to figure out what makes life worth continuing when they have no idea where it's going. Tyler stops, Day and Fisher accept, James keeps going. Then James turns around. None of them find the perfect answer, but there isn't one. And maybe that's the point. We're all driving down some version of this road. We're all trying to figure out what we're supposed to do with the time we have. And we're all told that eventually we'll reach some destination where everything will finally make sense. But maybe the destination doesn't exist. Maybe life isn't about finding the end. Maybe it's about the people sitting next to you. The conversations you have, the stupid jokes you make, the moments that seem meaningless at the time but become the things you remember. That's why the opening conversations matter. The screaming matters, why the Cliff Bar matters, and why James turning around matters. Because the movie begins with 4 friends trying to figure out where they're going, and ends with James realizing that he didn't actually need to know. He just needed someone beside him. And honestly, that's a pretty beautiful idea for a horror movie. Because maybe the road really is endless. Maybe there is no grand explanation. Maybe there is no perfect destination waiting for us. But that doesn't mean the journey has to be meaningless. Sometimes you just have to find somebody to ride with. And maybe that's what It Ends is truly trying to tell us. Not that the road never ends, but that we shouldn't spend our lives staring at the horizon waiting for it to. But now I want to hear what you think. What do you believe the road actually represents? Do you think it's purgatory, hell, some kind of cosmic punishment? Or do you think that the road is simply a metaphor for life and a transition into adulthood? And most importantly, which character do you think you will be? Would you be Tyler and eventually walk away? Would you be Day and Fisher and learn to accept the road? Or would you be James and keep driving until you found the end? Let me know your interpretation in the comments, because I honestly think this is one of those movies where there isn't just one correct answer. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'm trying to make these videos bigger, deeper, and more ambitious with every movie I cover. So if you want to see more horror movies broken down like this, you already know what to do. And if It Ends left you thinking about your own road, then maybe the movie did exactly what it was supposed to do. I'll see you guys in the next one.